Hello, adventurers! Welcome back to Lumi's Quests. Take a deep breath with me, hold it, and let it out. If you are ready to open your ears and listen closely today, let us know by gently tapping the like button right now. It helps our signal reach through the mysterious fog ahead. Done? Wonderful! Today, Giggle-Grove is, well, it's noisy. Very noisy. Remember the mysterious scroll Finn dropped last time? We are gathered in my hearth tower trying to decode it. But Zipp is running laps around the table because he's too excited. Tap, 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 tap. Otis is testing his new automatic page turner, which sounds like a broken lawnmower. Clank, whir, clank. And Shelby is trying to shout instructions over the noise. Order! I need silence to think, Shelby yelled, looking at the scroll through her magnifying glass. I looked closely at the scroll. It was made of an ancient, silvery leaf that hummed when you touched it. It didn't have drawn lines. It had symbols of ears, musical notes, and ripples. This isn't a map for eyes, I realized, my voice glowing with discovery. It's a map for ears. It leads to the Valley of Echoes. To find the lost waterfall, we don't need to look sharp, we need to listen deep. But can our noisy team manage that? Let's find out. The valley entrance and the reactive fog. We arrived at the edge of the valley. It was unlike the sunny grove. Here, the air was cool and smelled like damp peppermint and old stones. A thick, white fog rolled over the ground like a soft, heavy blanket. I can't see my tail, Zipp squeaked. I don't like it. I'm going to run through it to clear a path. Zipp zoomed forward. Zoom! But here is the magic of the valley. The fog reacts to sound. The louder Zipp ran, the thicker the fog became. It puffed up like rising dough, blocking his path. It's getting worse, Zipp cried out. Otis stepped up. Fear not, I have the solution. Behold, the Fog Be Gone Fan 3000. He pulled a cord. Rattle, hum, roar. The machine roared to life. But instead of blowing the fog away, the noise made the fog angry. The white mist turned a dark, stormy gray and swirled around us, trapping us in a cloud so dense we couldn't see our feet. Stop, Shelby commanded. The noise is feeding the fog. Otis cut the engine. As the silence returned, the fog softened and thinned out just a little. We learned our first lesson. In this valley, force doesn't work. Gentleness does. Mini Quest 1. The Mimic Birds. We moved deeper, stepping softly. The fog was thinner now, revealing twisted trees with blue bark. Suddenly, a voice shouted from above. Run! Go! Fast! Zipp looked up. Did you hear that? Someone needs help. He bolted toward the tree. Wait, Shelby warned. But Zipp was already shouting back. I'm coming! I'm Zipp! The voice shouted back, perfectly imitating Zipp. I'm Zipp! I'm Zipp! Then another voice joined in, sounding exactly like Otis. My fan is broken! Broken! We were surrounded by mimic birds. These cheeky creatures had metal feathers that acted like mirrors for sound. They didn't just repeat words, they amplified them. Zipp didn't understand. He stomped his foot and shouted, Stop copying me! But the bird just ruffled its metal feathers and squawked back a perfect mocking echo. Stop copying me! Zipp got red in the face. No, you stop! He yelled louder. The bird screeched back, its voice tinny and hollow like a robot. No, you stop! It was chaos. Every word Zipp said was thrown back at him twice as loud. The noise was becoming unbearable. The fog started to thicken again. We were getting nowhere. Mobi, who had been hiding behind my leg, tugged on Zipp's tail gently. Mobi put a finger to his lips. Shh. Mobi reached into his bag and pulled out a handful of soft, fluffy seeds. He didn't throw them. He held them out silently. The birds stopped shouting to look. Curiosity overcame their need to make noise. They flew down silently to eat. "We don't fight noise with noise," I whispered to the team. "We pass with peace." We tiptoed past the distracted birds. Finn's failed gadget. High above us, on a slippery ridge overlooking the valley, someone else was having a much harder time. Finn, the gleam thief, peered down through his brass spyglass. He watched our team tiptoeing carefully below and rolled his eyes. He wanted that treasure, but he had absolutely no patience for our slow pace. "Walking is for tortoises," Finn scoffed, smoothing his orange fur. "I prefer shortcuts." He reached into his bag of stolen tricks and pulled out a pair of spring-loaded kangaroo boots he had borrowed from a sleeping Joey. "Why walk when you can bounce?" he muttered with a grin. He strapped them tight, click, snap, and crouched low. With a mighty push, he launched himself into the air. Boing! He soared high above the blue trees, convinced he was a genius. But in the Valley of Echoes, noise is a magnet. The metallic mimic birds heard the loud, rusty squeak of the springs. They loved it. A dozen birds flapped up to meet him in mid-air, surrounding him like a shiny, chaotic cloud. They didn't just tweet, they screamed at the top of their little metal lungs, perfectly imitating the sound of his boots. Boing! Squeak! Boing! Squeak! The noise was deafening, echoing right in Finn's sensitive ears. Flustered and dizzy from the sonic attack, Finn lost his balance in mid-air. "Plan B! Plan B!" he yelped, flailing his paws. He fumbled for his backup gadget, a sticky vine grappling hook. He spotted a large, round, gray rock poking out of the mist below. "Gotcha," he whispered, aiming the vine. Thwack! The sticky end hit the target perfectly. Finn braced himself for a graceful landing. But rocks don't usually wiggle. The rock let out a low, grumpy groan. It wasn't a rock at all. Finn had hooked the shell of a giant, sleeping slumber beetle. The beetle, very annoyed by the rude poke, stood up on 6 creaky legs. It decided to move to a quieter nap spot. It lumbered away slowly, stomp, squelch, stomp, dragging a surprised Finn behind it like a heavy kite. "Not again," Finn sighed, his beautiful orange tail now looking like a muddy mop. He slid face first through the wet clay, creating a long furrow in the ground. For all his clever inventions, in this valley, his gadgets were worse than useless. The calm. The mossy grotto. We had escaped the birds, but the constant noise had exhausted everyone. Even Zipp was walking slowly, his tail dragging in the mud. "Rest time," Shelby announced. "We cannot find treasure with tired ears." We found a sheltered spot called the Mossy Grotto. It was a small cave lined with glowing purple moss that swallowed sound. It was quiet here, not scary quiet, but cozy quiet. As we sat, Otis asked the question we were all thinking. "Lumi, why is the waterfall lost? How can a giant waterfall just hide?" I smiled. "Long ago," I explained, "the waterfall sang to the whole forest. But the world grew loud. Everyone wanted to shout. No one wanted to listen. The waterfall is shy. It felt unappreciated, so it hid behind the fog. It's waiting for someone who knows how to just be." Zipp looked down at his paws. "I'm loud," he whispered. "Does the waterfall hate me?" "No, Zipp," Mobi said softly. "It just misses the silence between the sounds. That's where the magic is." Mini Quest 2: The Chime-Vines. Refreshed from our rest, we continued until the path ended abruptly. We found ourselves standing on the edge of a dizzying, mist-filled ravine. It was too wide to jump, even for Zipp. There was no wooden bridge. Instead, hanging from the giant ancient branches high above were hundreds of long, translucent vines. They shimmered in the fog, looking like ropes made of frozen diamonds or spun glass. Shelby adjusted her glasses and squinted at the humming scroll. "The instructions are specific," she read. "Only harmony holds the weight. Dissonance brings the fall." Otis didn't wait for the riddle. He reached out and tested the thickest vine. Crash! The vine exploded into sparkling dust the moment he touched it. Otis didn't look upset. He looked fascinated. He adjusted his goggles and examined the dust. "Aha!" he exclaimed. "It's not just fragile, it's resonance. If we touch the wrong note, the vibration destroys the bridge. We need to find the correct sound frequency." Zipp tried next. "I'll just go fast." He leaped onto a different vine. Crack, snap! It splintered instantly under his feet. Zipp scrambled back to the ledge, his heart pounding, his tail bushed out in fear. "They're all traps," he squeaked. "We're stuck." I closed my eyes and let the canyon breeze wash over me. "No," I said, "they aren't traps. They are an instrument. Listen." A gust of wind swept through the ravine. Whoosh! The vines swayed and clinked together. Most of them made a dull, flat thud, like a plastic cup hitting the floor. Clunk, thud, buzz. But a few, a very special few, rang out with a pure, clear, bell-like tone. Ting, ping, hum. "The vines that sing in tune are strong," I explained. "The ones that sound sour or dull are weak." We had to cross by building a bridge of melody, one vine at a time. Mobi stepped forward. He tapped a vine with one finger. Zzz. He shook his head. He tapped the next one. Ting! A perfect high note. He grabbed it and pulled with all his weight. It held firm as steel. We formed a nervous chain. Mobi led the way. Ting, swing, ping, swing. He looked like he was dancing on air. Then Otis followed. He stepped on a vine that went thud. "Wrong note, Otis," Shelby warned from behind. Otis froze, his foot hovering over the empty drop. He shifted to the left. Ting. Safe. The hardest part was for Zipp. He had to move in slow motion, which goes against his very nature. He was shaking, his paws vibrating with the effort of patience. But he closed his eyes and listened. Ding, step, hum, step. Slowly, carefully, note by note, we crossed the deep ravine on a bridge made entirely of music. The crossroads and the 3 tunnels. Finally, after hours of trekking, we reached the very heart of the valley. The fog lifted slightly, revealing a colossal wall of twisted, ancient roots that blocked our path completely. At the base of this wall were 3 dark, mysterious tunnels. Each one seemed to promise something different. The left tunnel was pulsating with a hypnotic, dancing blue light. It hummed with raw power, enticing Otis like a moth to a flame. The right tunnel smelled overwhelmingly sweet, like warm, sugary strawberry jam bubbling on a stove. Zipp's nose twitched uncontrollably, and his mouth watered. The middle tunnel? Well, it was just a hole. It was dark, damp, and looked completely boring. "Strawberries!" Zipp shouted, his nose twitching uncontrollably. "That isn't just a tunnel, it's a buffet. The reward must be a giant fruit feast." Illogical, Otis argued, adjusting his goggles. Look at the left tunnel. It's glowing with energy. That must be where the artifact is powered. Shelby frantically unrolled the map. Stop guessing. The map doesn't mention smells or disco lights. It clearly says, ignore the flash, ignore the sweet, follow the lowest hum. But impulse was stronger than instructions. I'm going in. Zipp zoomed into the right tunnel before Shelby could blink. And I shall collect the energy. Otis marched into the left tunnel. Seconds later, chaos erupted. Ah! Itchy! 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 Zipp burst out of his tunnel, running in circles and scratching his fur frantically. It wasn't strawberries, it was sneaky ivy that smells like strawberries. My tail is on fire. At the same moment, Otis backed out of his tunnel, looking green. It wasn't energy, he stuttered, wiping goo off his apron. It was a colony of bioluminescent slime slugs. I stepped in them. It's very squishy. They were judging by what they wanted to see, not what was actually there. They had fallen for the valley's tricks. Enough, Shelby commanded, slamming her walking stick into the mud. Everyone, freeze. Statue mode. Now. The team froze. Zipp stopped scratching. Otis stopped shaking his foot. The chaos was silenced. Mobi, I said softly, turning to our quietest friend. They are trying to look and smell. Show them how to listen. The sound of the earth. Mobi stepped forward into the center of the clearing. He didn't look at the tunnels. Instead, he slowly lowered himself down, pressing his palms flat against the cold, wet clay of the valley floor. He closed his giant eyes, shutting out the world of sight. We all watched him, holding our breath. It wasn't easy to focus. To his right, Zipp was wiggling and scratching his itchy nose, scritch, scratch, scritch, trying desperately not to sneeze again. To his left, the glowing tunnel buzzed like a broken light bulb, and the slime slugs squelched noisily. But Mobi became as still as a stone. He pushed his awareness deep down, past the mud, past the roots, anchoring himself to the ground. He listened to the earth. At first, there was nothing but the damp silence. Then he felt it, a vibration. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It started in his fingertips and traveled up his arms. It wasn't a sound you hear with your ears. It was a sound you feel in your bones. It was a low, steady rhythm, powerful and ancient. It wasn't coming from the flashy, glowing tunnel, and it certainly wasn't coming from the sweet-smelling strawberry tunnel. It was coming from the dark, boring middle tunnel. The vibration sounded like a deep, heavy purr, like the sleeping giant himself was breathing in his slumber. Mobi opened his eyes. The soft inner eyelids blinked once, then twice. He stood up and nodded confidently at the dark, empty mouth of the middle cave. He didn't look scared of the shadows anymore. He looked certain. Shelby looked at the dark hole and shivered. Are you sure, Mobi? It looks empty. Mobi just smiled and placed his hand on his heart, mimicking the deep rhythm he had felt. The truth isn't always shiny, I whispered to the team, realizing what Mobi had found. Sometimes the most precious things are hidden in the dark. One by one, trusting our smallest friend, we stepped away from the lights and followed Mobi into the shadows. The waterfall of liquid light. The tunnel was tight and smelled of ancient earth. As we walked deeper, the strange, low humming sound grew louder. It wasn't an annoying noise like the fan. It was a warm, resonant sound that vibrated right in the center of our chests, like a happy secret waiting to be told. Suddenly, the narrow walls widened. We stepped out onto a high, rocky ledge and gasped. "Whoa," Otis whispered, pushing his goggles up to see better. His mouth hung open in pure wonder. The confusing fog was completely gone. The air here was crisp and sparkling. Directly in front of us, cascading down from the high cliffs, was the lost waterfall. But it wasn't made of water. It was flowing streams of pure liquid light. Thick ribbons of neon blue, soothing teal, and warm gold poured down the rocks like glowing honey. It was bright, but it didn't hurt our eyes. It felt like looking at a gentle sunset. When the liquid light hit the pool below, it didn't splash or crash. Instead, upon impact, the light transformed into floating, glowing bubbles. And as each bubble drifted up and burst, it released a perfect, soft, musical note. Pop-ting, pop-hum, pop-ding. The air was filled with a visible symphony. In the center of the swirling pool floated the artifact we had sought, the harmony harp. It was carved from smooth, golden wood that seemed to have its own inner light. Invisible fingers were gently plucking its strings, weaving the popping bubbles into the peaceful, steady rhythm that kept the forest alive. We didn't rush to grab it. We didn't cheer or high-five. We just stood there, letting the sound and light wash over us like a warm bath. Even Zipp, who never stops moving, slowly sat down on the edge of the ledge. He wrapped his fluffy tail around himself and sat completely still, his eyes wide and reflecting the dancing colors, utterly mesmerized by the beauty. Finn's lesson and epilogue. We secured the harp and walked back through the dark tunnel. As we stepped out into the valley, leaving the secret cave behind, we saw a movement. It was Finn. He was sitting on a rock outside the tunnel entrance, covered in sticky silk and mud. He hadn't made it inside. He looked at us, then at the golden glow coming from my bag. For a second, his greedy eyes softened. He realized we found something he couldn't reach with just speed and gadgets. For the first time, Finn didn't try to grab anything. He just nodded, a silent respect for the discovery, and slipped away to wash the mud off his tail. "We did it," Shelby said, checking her list. "And we did it without breaking anything. Mostly." We walked home, guided by the harp's melody. Today, we learned that the world is loud, and it's easy to get distracted by the noise, or by things that look like strawberries but aren't. Mobi showed us that to find the truth, you have to stop, you have to breathe, and you have to listen with more than just your ears. We are back safe, but Zipp is still scratching his itchy nose from the fake strawberries. We need your help for the next adventure. We are starting the Lumi's Legend Contest. We need a special calm down trick for Zipp to use next time the fog gets loud. What is your secret way to relax? Do you hum a quiet song? Do you count to 10? Or maybe you imagine a sleeping giant? Tell us your trick in the comments. The best one will help Zipp in the next episode. Sweet dreams, brave listeners. Remember, the quietest voice often has the most to say.